Hi everyone.
Hi everyone, we thank you for being here. I'm just going to say a few quick words about our panel moderator here, Dan. Dan Dyer is a third year med student here. He does a lot of work with Magis Clinic, and we're very excited to have him. He was also our financial chair of the conference last year, which was the first year it was held here at Creighton. So he's put in a lot of work for this, and I'm going to hand now. Oh, it was not. Okay, so that didn't get snapped up. That's okay. This is Dan Dyer. He's our panel moderator, and now this is fun.
Thank you and welcome to the panel. So this is the panel on the role of spirituality in the art of healing. I don't want to leave a lot of time for you guys to ask questions, but I have a few to start with for the panel. On our panel, we have Dr. Catherine Opere, Phil Garrity, Dr. Jason Beste, and Father Carlson. So my first question for them is if they can just tell us briefly their story and one or two events or occurrences in their life that have most shaped their view on spirituality and health. I don't know who wants to take it first.
Ladies first.
All right, so I'll try the short version. So I was born in Kenya, East Africa, and I grew up Seventh-day Adventist. And we were exposed to spirituality, we go to church every day and keep the Sabbath day holy, that kind of thing. And so I knew the Word of God and I knew the spirituality was part of our life, but I didn't see any prayers answered, I just knew we prayed every night before we went to bed. And so anyway, come forward, I became a Protestant, and I was now here in the United States. And I had a chance to go as a missionary to Arusha, Tanzania, together, so I was just part of a team. And I was shocked because the Bible became alive. Almost everybody we prayed for was healed, lives were changed, and you could feel the tangible power of God. And I knew that kind of shaped my walk with God from then on, because I knew that it's not just something you do, but it's real, and it can have an impact on your life. So I would say that by far that is probably the biggest encounter that changed my spirituality.
But first of all, thank you guys for having me here. I'm excited to be on this panel. So a few things that I would say were big things that shaped this kind of intersection of it's not fair to call them interests. I think they're matters of ultimate concern, as Paul Tillich says. But one thing is I was on my way to medical school. I was working for Partners in Health, an NGO in Boston, and I started having really serious anxiety because I didn't really know it at the time, but I was kind of going through this existential crisis. And it wasn't just about what am I going to do professionally, but sort of grappling with some bigger issues of what our work was really about and what my role in it was. So it was a deeply spiritual kind of soul-searching process for me. And so that was a chance for me to kind of dive deeper into the more sort of existential and spiritual dimensions of illness. I was reading a lot of Arthur Kleinman, who's actually Paul Farmer, co-founder of Partners in Health, his mentor. He's a psychiatrist and a medical anthropologist who writes a lot on meaning making. So anyways, I was reading a lot. He wrote The Illness Narratives, which is a very famous book about sort of patients navigating those moral and philosophical and existential dimensions of illness. And anyways, that eventually led me to withdraw my acceptance shortly before starting med school, which was the right decision for me. And then the next thing, which I'll just say briefly, it was a few weeks after that being diagnosed with bone cancer, which kind of led me in a more experiential way into these mysteries, which weren't really things to fix anymore. It was more something to engage with and try to be present for, and see if I could learn from it. So so those are two big things that have shaped this for me.
Thanks, Phil. My name is Jason Beste, and it's great to be here. I actually graduated undergrad from here and med school. Got a hot mic here. Are those SNL episodes? But it's great to see Phil. I actually met Phil 2-3 years ago when I worked for PIH in Malawi, and when I come back to the Boston office, that's where I first met him. So it's fun to be able to be back together, and it's wonderful meeting you too. And I don't know if you know, this gentleman here is one of the most famous Jesuits at Creighton. He was there when I was here at undergrad, and it's really fun to see you again. Yeah. So I think my story, I'll just kind of hit 2 points. One is I think there's really importance between spirituality for people who are in the hospital, patients, and the difference, the relationship a provider-patient has, and I'll tell you a story on that. And then also what I don't want to ignore up here, and I don't think we will, but is your own spirituality, and how is that going to give you the strength to get through whatever you do, all right? And I, unfortunately, can only speak from a physician's standpoint, because any occupation or any calling you have, you need to have that spirituality. But for me, that's what keeps me going, and guides the decisions that my wife and I have made where we are today. So those are both 2 really important things. So to first discuss the importance, when I was kind of first introduced between patient and clinician spirituality, the interaction between the two, I think I really learned a great lesson after college. Don't worry, I'll talk about Creighton for the first after that. After college, I volunteered for a year on a Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And I really tried to dive into the local culture, and I learned a lot about Lakota spirituality. And what I realized was how powerful prayer was for Lakota people, and how no matter whatever illness they had and they were being treated by the doctor, people only felt better. They only felt healed, or not only. They often felt healed or more healed when they had a good spirituality. And when you look between when a medicine man and a person prays together, and you see that connection, you see a patient feeling much better. I think one of the questions we asked before was what we were asked to prepare on is, what does healing mean? Is that the same thing as health, or is it different? But when you see a patient becoming healed through their own spirituality is amazing. And that's more than I could ever give with a medicine. So I started to see how important that interplay was, and then what's my role as a physician in that interplay. So I thank Basil Braveheart and a few other people on Pine Ridge for teaching me that importance, that relationship importance, and that how medicine's just not, or healing's just not a medicine you give to somebody. It's that interaction with spirituality. And then the second part is my own spirituality, and I really credit Creighton and a lot of the Ignatian spirituality here to really helping me find my own calling, my own passions, and having the strength to follow those calls, which can be hard at times. And I couldn't do this if I didn't have a strong spirituality inside. And that's where I really feel like it was here that really helped me find that.
Please, you were holding that so wonderfully. Please hold it to me, because this is gonna drive me nuts. Thank you for coming. I've been a Jesuit for 55 years, and my claim to be on this panel is probably most of all that I have listened to hurting people for 50 years. I want to say that the operative sense of spirituality for me is what you do with the tensions occasioned by your beliefs. Spirituality is what you do with the tensions occasioned by your beliefs. What has shaped my view of spirituality in healthcare is the experience of listening to people like Jason, coming back from immersion health experiences and other immersion experiences. Creighton's signature event for undergraduates and professional students is spring break service trips and summer immersions at places like the Dominican Republic or the Indian missions. My sense is that people go off as generous, affluent people who want to give to others. They come back as people who have found themselves standing with others. And for me, that is a crucial gathering focus for what it is to be a healer. It is not just to be for others, but to be standing with them. That's what I'm going to say on this first round. I have heard so many people coming back, having made that jump or that transition. That's, I think, what I have learned by watching spirituality in healthcare.
Okay, I'll just ask you again. So my next question for you, Jason, you touched on this a little bit, is how, in your experience, both personal and professional, how do you guys define health? And how do you define healing? Maybe how has that changed based on your interactions?
All right, so I think the body, we are triune beings, body, soul, and spirit. And oftentimes, when we speak of healing, we're referring to the body. But I think health refers to both body, soul, and spirit. And that takes a lot. It takes more than just, Tylenol for your pain or something like that. So, to me, when we talk of health, and I'll use I'll give a biblical verse for that. I think in the New Testament, 3 John verse 2, it says, "Beloved, I wish above all that you prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers." And I think this verse captures the essence of it, because we are referring to prosperity of the soul, prosperity of the spirit, prosperity of the body, and that would define health to me. And so I think as healthcare workers, I'm a pharmacist by training. I practiced in Kenya for a couple of years before I came here for my graduate degrees. But as a pharmacist, or as somebody practicing in Africa, we saw this again. I would agree with Jason. We saw this over and over. And oftentimes somebody will come for, you give them the pain, but they will still go see that witch doctor, or they'll call, their pastor if they've converted to Christianity. And so in places like Africa, in many places like Africa, what I saw growing up is that aspect of spirituality was always there. They would rather go to their witch doctor or herbalist before they go to if all else fails, they go to the hospital. So to answer the question, health in totality refers to prosperity of the body, the soul, and the spirit.
I think one thing I would say about, I don't know so much about a very hard line between health and healing. I think, as you were saying, I think there's more expansive and holistic ways of looking at both of those terms. And I think the most narrow view, which is maybe more the rule than the exception in a lot of the ways medicine operates in this country, is to see it only on a physical and bodily level. And then the sort of mental stuff is really just if you're having trouble sticking to the bodily instructions, right, and the pills you need to take and the procedures you need to do. So it's sort of in the service of the physical problems and solutions. But I would say, for me personally, and I think this really comes to be a deeply spiritual thing, is healing is in my experience, a matter of forgiveness. That year I was talking about really wrestling with a lot of intense anxiety. There was also a lot of kind of self-loathing because I was angry at myself for not being able to just sort of seize these amazing opportunities that were right in front of me, this sort of wonderful career path in global health that was opening up. And for whatever reason, I was the only problem that wasn't making that happen because of these doubts and worries and anxieties and deeper questions. And I just wanted that to go away and for that part of myself to disappear. And so through the course of that year, with really doing a lot of reading and reflecting and meditating, learning to meditate, it was really this process of coming to trust myself again, and to trust my mind, first of all, but in a more holistic sense. And when I was diagnosed with cancer, that it was this moment of realizing that exercise and learning to trust ourselves and really accept the totality of who we are, that was just a continuation. It was sort of a seamless transition to do that in perhaps a much deeper and more demanding way, but to really come to forgive my body for not being perfect and forgive my life for not being perfect. And I think that's an act of love, and I think that's healing as I can define it, at least in the deepest sense. And so I think that form of communion, and oftentimes with other people, but with ourselves and with God, that sort of integration of these fragmented parts is what healing is for me. So forgiveness is the one word I would want to kind of put my finger on there for that.
I think health, I really like what Catherine was saying too. I think health is in the mind, body, spirit, and I think in the medical field we say that's the biopsychosocial method, right, or biopsychosocial process that we all learn, in medical school, that you should always take a good social history and understand what all those things are that cause all those factors that could cause poor health. And actually, I'm a big believer more in public health, in that this is social determinants of health is the most important factor of what the definition of health is. So it's, do you grow up in poverty? Do you grow up with access to education? Do you grow up to safe neighborhoods where you can actually go for a walk at night? And do you have a park to play in? All these things make up health, right? It's just not, do you have high blood pressure? Or do you have pain or whatever? Healing is, I agree. I think it's really, I don't have a hardline definition. And I really liked what you said about forgiveness. That's beautiful. It's a beautiful insight. I think everybody has probably their own definition of what it means to be healed. And I think what I'm saying, one of the reasons I say that is, as a physician, I know I can't heal everybody. And I know people are going to die when I'm taking care of them. Death is a natural part of life. So it's the frame of mind and the frame of spirit, the frame of one's self-forgiveness. Like at that time when they're very sick, if they feel happy or they feel like they can come at peace with themselves, I think that's healing, is when you become at peace. And you're also, you may pass away. And I don't think I failed as a physician when you pass away, because everybody, that's part of natural life. But if that person who is sick feels at peace with themselves with whatever illness, then I think we've got some healing going on. But I think everyone's got a different definition.
We're hearing some wonderful things here. This is stimulating for me, but we did not plot together beforehand. I want to say two things about healing. First, healing is a ministry. What's a ministry? The first thing I want to say about a ministry is it's a service with a relationship. This fits with, I think things you've been hearing about whether you are just interested in healing the body, or whether you are doing something for someone or with them. So healing is a ministry, and so it fits naturally in a religious world, but it's also a ministry whatever you think you're doing. I love what Jason is saying, that we need to pay attention to the spirituality of both the sufferer and the person who is trying to stand with the person in suffering. So healing is a ministry, a service that includes a relationship. That means it's not mechanical or simply professional. I take it that stands against a great deal of practice by medical personnel in this country, and I mean it to be challenging to the way medical people feel allowed to practice medicine. Okay, second thing I want to say, as a person who deals much more broadly with ministry than with medical ministry, is the basic ministry is listening. Another way of saying that is the basic ministry is giving people a sense that someone gives a damn about their lives. This, I think, is what we've been hearing about entering into people's experience, letting them have their experience, but being a careful listener to it and maybe standing with them.
My next question is actually one that I had not planned on asking, but one that, just from your insights, I hope will be helpful. Is, have you ever had a time when your own beliefs and spirituality conflicted with your role in healing? Whether, like personally for yourself or in a relationship with a patient or with someone else? And how did you approach that? And how was that difficult, or was it not?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
sure. Have you ever had a time where your own beliefs and spirituality conflicted with your role in healing? And how did you approach that tension? I don't know if you want to start. You know the word. Anyone can start.
I'll just make a comment here that now I do research in the lab. I don't work with patients anymore. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that. But I could imagine lots of scenarios, but I'd rather hear from practicing physicians in this country.
Yeah, I think I could take this question in two different directions. One would be, I'm thinking of some hospital chaplaincy work I was doing this past summer, and I was interacting with patients of all different faith backgrounds and no faith backgrounds. And so I can talk about kind of little learning lessons there of sort of inconsistencies and me learning about their past and tradition and whatnot. But I think what more comes to mind with this question is, I don't know if I would call them, what was the word, inconsistencies or contradiction or something, or tension. Like there was a conflict necessarily, but I remember when I was doing treatment, there'd be these moments, and I probably got through about 3 months of chemo before I kind of hit these rock bottom moments, and it wouldn't be a one-time thing. But I think for me, that's where my spiritual or my faith claims kind of lost their foundations, and in a way that was totally beyond my control. In a way, it wasn't. You can hold on to them or try to, but I think in certain circumstances they do kind of fall away, and you're sort of left. I remember sort of reaching these points. It was usually when it was very late at night in the hospital, and a lot of things were going wrong, or just not according to the plan. And with chemotherapy, there's a lot of little points to hit on a plan, on an agenda, and there's lots of opportunities for that not to go the right way. So when I say plan, it's still a pretty uncomfortable one, but lots of things, like spiking fevers and that aren't going down, and needing new antibiotics, needing new scans, whatever. It's just all this cacophony of disturbances and agitations, and it sort of would get to this point where it would just be so overwhelming that I kind of have to let go, and really sort of cross this threshold that I would have assumed was total despair. And I didn't know what it was, or annihilation, or just, me sort of letting go in this ultimate way. And again, in that sort of void or emptiness, I remember it wasn't a matter of words. It wasn't like I asked or articulated this question of, does this matter? Or do I matter? I don't think I articulated that, but I think that's what I was kind of sending out into that void. And crossing that threshold, it was this, again, not a word, not even an articulated phrase, but a sensation or a feeling of a very resounding yes, you do matter. And even if you want to give up on yourself, the universe is not giving up. And again, this is all after the fact, me trying to put words to this, but I think there's an interesting thing where we do reach these moments where we have to let go of those, of what we believe and sort of have it fall back into our hands, essentially, or how it's kind of slide back into love when we've lost any sense of it. So that's my very esoteric way of answering that question, but just that idea, the image maybe I want to leave there is just of those beliefs and constructs and things we can hold on to on most days in a tangible sense and say, well, this is what I believe. But when those really fall out of our hands, the necessity of being patient and vigilant and waiting to see what maybe falls back in. So.
This is a way, I think, excuse me, of saying the same thing as you just heard in that profound answer. I don't think I have ever experienced conflict, but I have certainly experienced tension. And spirituality is how you deal with the tensions that are occasioned by your beliefs. So that's a productive thing. It's an integral thing. It's a part of life. Anyway, the principal tension I have experienced, and I think I have listened to people experiencing, is failure. I think that's one way of looking at what you just described, and healers are programmed for success. And so they're going to find plenty of experiences. I think Jason was describing this before, where you can't heal. This one is not yielding. So I want to throw in one other thing there. It's a big mistake, I think, in any ministry, particularly in the healing profession, when you are faced with failure, to run to refuge answers, rather than to stand with the person who is suffering. What are some of those refuges? To give your own experience of being sick. That's not what the patient needs to hear now. You can stand with the patient, but it's not, oh, I suffered and I got over it. Stand with the patient now in his or her struggle. Don't give a sermon on suffering in any light, and especially, please, don't give a Christian sermon about how wonderful suffering is and productive. Don't philosophize. We all face these things. No help. Don't promise or give false hopes. If you only believe, you'll be cured. That's not fair to people. Better to stand with them and to face your own inability to heal the person. This is part of life, and you're in it with the person. Don't take away the fact that they're suffering.
That's good. I think I like the tension, because that's actually what came to my mind. I couldn't come up with any conflicts between myself and a patient. But a personal tension I have, and I think I have two examples. One tension is, I did my residency in the Bronx, and I don't want to play stereotypes, but it was a tough place. It's really impoverished. It's the most impoverished, poorest congressional district in the United States. It's in the South Bronx. And so I had a lot of patients who, because of social determinants of health, were having had a lot of problems. And I think some of them that I struggled with, and again, I don't want to stereotype, but I had a lot of heroin abusers, and they would charge in, they'd come in the clinic, and and they would be very demanding, and it's where we actually get trained of how do you learn, always put yourself at the door, never have the patient between you and the door, never have the door open, and all these things, and so sometimes these patients, and not just, sometimes patients can get very vocal. And when a patient gets vocal with me or starts to threaten, and I don't want to say I ever was threatened ever by a knife or anything, but they'll be intimidating because they want what they really desire. And again, this is from a disease, and it's not necessarily their fault that they have this disease. What I want to do is turn off. I want to get upset. I want to stand my ground and be like, no, out of my office. This is not appropriate. You can't threaten me, right? That's the worst reaction that I could ever have. And so I get this tension with spirituality where I start to realize, if my role here as a provider, and I believe this is the calling, I believe that I'm supposed to be in this moment. And when tension arises, this is where, I think in my own faith tradition, this is where Christ is present. And so take a deep breath and be like, okay, how am I going to deal with you in a different way instead of trying to like be tough? And that's a tension that I struggle with because I don't know how to do that effectively. But I think it's recognizing that and then listening. And then every time I found out is if I just let them vent and vent and vent, people calm down. And then I feel like that's a good way to deal with it. And then the second way is, at odds with my own personal spirituality was in a lot of the global health work I've done. I lived in Malawi for a couple of years, and I can't tell you how many kids I had die from cerebral malaria or other things, and literally having hands on them, they stopped breathing. And like that to me is one of the hardest things, is feeling this adult or especially a kid, like stop breathing at your hands when you're trying to put IVs and trying to give medicine. And like that's hard to swallow. And then of course you question like, what the heck? Like why? Why? You know, like why would this happen? Why would a good God have let this happen? And that's the wrong question to ask. And I think that's where, again, when there's that tension is an invitation. And so what I do is try to reflect on that invitation while I feel this way. And I think a lot of times this is what's propelled a lot of more of my interest in advocacy work is fighting against those health systems that prevent patients getting health care, that prevent the poor from getting health care. Right? So I think I try to work through that angle and then through an advocacy piece.
I think we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to open it up to any questions from the audience.
I have two. Dr. Beste, to what would you ascribe the story that you just told me? How is it that the first reaction would not be to de-escalate? And the first reaction would be tough.
Yeah. So the initial, I think human emotion is when you have somebody who is standing in front of your face threatening you with their fists, is to get defensive and be like, want to protect myself. And then after that initial 1 second reaction is to de-escalate the situation. So I think that's why I said when somebody is very threatening to you, your first defense is you want to protect yourself, and then you realize they're not coming really after you. It's a disease process and something else that they want.
The reason that I'm asking is that in Omaha, we have crisis intervention trained police versus regular police. And parents who have children who are mentally ill and young adults who act out, if they know, they call the CIT police when they dial 911. And there's a whole different reaction because that CIT policeman has knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, this is my second question. In the 1950s, my mother was depressed, and she went to a parish priest, and he said, pray and offer it up. In 2016, the research shows discrimination and bullying causes illness, early mortality, and higher mortality. There are church beliefs that discriminate against people who are gay or transgender. They're seen as less than, they need mercy, as opposed to a church showing justice. And in your roles as a pharmacist, as a speaker, writer, as a physician, as an ordered priest, what is your responsibility in terms of public health policy to decrease this morbidity and mortality?
I think I'll just start since I have the mic. As a physician, I think that's a great question, and it's great research that has come out and that has shown this. I think this is the important part of a physician twofold. I think one is to always be non-judgmental and to always listen, because everybody is equal. And to create an atmosphere, if I am seeing a patient and who has any of these problems that they're coming up with, or any struggles, I should say, that they're coming with, and just let them talk about it in a caring environment, not just
I'm interested in policy.
Yep, and then the second is where I'm going. So I think one is, first I think it's really important to address your mother. If she came in to me and she didn't have, and I told her, this is your own fault for having depression, or go pray and you'll be taken care of. Like, I think that's wrong. I think that initial interaction is really important to have with somebody, to open up and to listen. And then the second part of being a physician is advocacy arm of being a physician. I don't think physicians today are as much advocates as they could be. And I think they're busy for a lot of reasons, but I think it's, personally, is advocating on the Hill, or advocating social policies within your own city, standing up on city councils and going to environments and saying, look, these people are being discriminated against, or X, Y, and Z, and to use the role of the physician, which actually is a pretty powerful role that we have, and what we say counts in politics, is to use that role to make policy changes, or to at least increase other people's knowledge of these conditions.
I do agree. Advocacy plays a big role. But oftentimes, rules can be made, but they won't necessarily be implemented. Implementation takes a whole different thing. So I think part of it also starting from the grassroots, changing behavior, changing from family unit, going upwards, using every means we have, whether it's news or school system, teachers. We need to have a different mindset, thinking of kids that are being bullied in school, and just parents, in society telling people, you can't do this. So it goes beyond making rules or changing regulations, because regulations will be made, but they won't necessarily be obeyed. We saw that with the civil rights movement. And so I think it goes beyond. Advocacy is a good place to start, but I think it has to be something where we all engage, or those who are, increase awareness, create awareness, increase awareness. Is that person who's, gay, they're still a human being. They still need to be treated with dignity. And I'm thinking of Jesuit values, finding God in all things, and also the innate dignity of a human being. Everybody is a soul created by God. And I think that everybody deserves to be loved, no matter what they believe. So I think if we started from there, and we looked at them through the lens of love, that will change the society.
Throw something in there. That's a great question. I want to speak to the part about bullying gays. I think that's part of your question. I think, and this is my own opinion, that's all, within the Catholic Church, lay people and professionals have a serious invitation and responsibility to challenge Catholic homophobia, whether it's in rules or statements or behaviors. That's the way it's going to change. I think priests have to do that too, but I'm not talking to many priests right now in this section, but lay people and professionals have an opportunity, I think, today, and a responsibility to speak up against homophobia, where they find it.
Any other questions?
I guess just as like a second-year medical student or any other student here, what are just some ways that we can start tackling these things now? I mean, it can be so stifling just being in the classroom and having, being at the bottom of the totem pole. I mean, that itself can be challenging to kind of be yourself and be, spiritually yourself. So I guess what are some of the challenges and then just some of the things you would recommend or that we could start now?
I've got a quick answer. Are you a Creighton student?
UNMC.
UNMC. I have been a part for the last 4 years of student groups called Ignatian Wisdom Groups, which is a fancy title for seniors taking time every 2 weeks together in groups of about 8 or 9 people to process the issues of their senior year in a discerning, reflective mode. My encouragement to you would be find a group of like-minded people and commit yourself to a chance to talk through your spirituality, what you do with the tensions created by your own beliefs. with people who will give a damn about what you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. One thing I would say is I don't think you have to worry too much in medical school about your technical skill sets getting a lot of airtime, and you're going to be focusing on that extensively for the next several years. One thing that doesn't become such an intentional practice is to work on your, or to just take care of your sense of optimism and compassion and inspiration and hope. And those things, when neglected, can really atrophy and harden and kind of wither away. And I think there are a lot of systemic issues that contribute to that that aren't going to change overnight. But I think it's important to acknowledge that you, and hopefully in community with other people, are sort of responsible for protecting that and sort of nurturing it. So I would just say, yeah, and that the other thing is that to assume because you're in a caring profession that makes you a caring individual, I think is a really dangerous assumption because it can lead us to just this sort of complacency to say, well, I'm giving people medicine and I'm taking care of them, so I don't need to really do the harder work, I would say, of really like constantly trying to re-examine in a deeper sense and in confronting the challenges that you will face that will totally, you know, like the combative patient or the child dying or the really dysfunctional leadership in a given medical unit or something. Those are all opportunities to really kind of reinvestigate and check into that core sort of source of inspiration and sort of motivation for why you're here and what drew you here. So I would just say intentionality there is very key, and then the practical kind of elements of that, finding like-minded people, carving out space and time during the week or the day, whether it's like 5 minutes or a 30-minute kind of prayer or meditation or group activity or something once a week that you can really commit to in saying this is important beyond just the coursework and all the other requirements that are demanding your time and energy. So that's what I would say. Not super concrete and practical, but I think important.
Well, I guess I haven't been to medical school, so I'm probably not the best person to answer this. But what helps, help me just a time of reflection and, take time to reflect in the morning or in the middle of the day and maybe listen to some music that you like or listen to maybe the Bible audio, something like that. Just take time to do something that removes your way from all the tension that you have to deal with all day. I think that would make a big difference. But reflection time, really, spirituality, just Ignatius exercises, what we lovingly call that a Creighton. So those really make a difference, especially when you have really tough days going on and exams and everything. So.
If it's a quick question, yes. If anyone's
this might be most pointed at Phil. I know you were talking about how sometimes in hard situations it's not appropriate to share your own story, what you were saying. And I, being a cancer survivor myself, I sometimes feel like you have an empathy that a lot of people don't understand. And so when you're talking to that person, like, what have you found to be an effective way of explaining, whether it's just like, wait, how am I going to get to tomorrow? Or, things like that. I guess I don't know a super pointed question I'm trying to ask, but like, how do you express that to someone without saying, oh, I made it, you're going to make it, when that's
Yeah.
not the case always.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important thing, and I don't think it's such a unique thing. I mean, having been through cancer is a rare thing for people at our age, but at least in this this part of the world. But it's a very universal thing that we all have life experiences and certain ways of being able to relate to people, and an important part of connecting with them is to be able to draw from your own experience, and sometimes that's very explicitly, saying this is what happened to me, and here's how I think it connects to what's going on with you. I've been learning a ton, and mostly through mistakes, about what it means to draw from my own experience, and working in the hospital this past summer as a chaplain. I mean, they weren't huge mistakes. I think the worst that it does is it deflects attention away from the person who's really in need, and that should maybe be the thing at the front of your mind is this going to serve the person in front of me, or is it kind of just something that I'm excited to share because I can relate to it? So there's that, but I think what I was thinking about as you were sort of voicing your question, one thing my supervisor told me, which I'm going to mention in my talk a little later, he said this thing which I think was so important, and I'm still chewing on it. He said, your wisdom is rooted in your pain, not in your intellect. And I think there's different ways of taking that, but I think even in saying your intellect, all the things that we do to process these sort of raw experiences that we have throughout life, all of the ways that we kind of build a narrative around it and an identity around it, and sort of attaching ourselves to these stories, and often to pain and suffering. We carry that with us, and it has a very tight hold on us, and that's a natural thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. But I think what it requires is to not just be operating out of the intellect, out of the kind of second level, higher order processing of the experience, is to really tap back into the experience itself, meaning the uncertainty of it, and your sense of helplessness and fear and pain, right? To really tap into those, and maybe not even speak directly to them. You're not naming that explicitly, but you're rooted in that as you're engaging with that patient, right? Rather than just, here's all the things I've learned about it, and let me give you that wisdom as if it'll be like some toolkit for you. So that's what I would say. Maybe it's almost like a Buddhist koan or something. I don't know how to take that, rooting yourself in your pain and not in your intellect, and that can somehow be of service to people. Yeah.
Great question. I couldn't agree more with the answer. Let me formulate my response, which I think is the same as Phil's, this way. It's good for you to remember your experience that's coming out of your pain. It's the right thing to do, I think, for the patient now is to find the right question, like, can you tell me more about it? What's it like? Or even, what can you do as you go forward in this situation? You might want to ask, is there some way I can be of help as you face this? But I wouldn't be telling the person stuff. I would be giving them the experience of being listened to by trying to find the right question.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just say one last thing that's coming to mind is, I'm sort of getting at this, but I think what's really key is to kind of returning to this place of unknowing, right? And not assuming, even if you're working with someone who had the same diagnosis at the same age, right? And that would come up for me where I'm like, oh, I've been here, like I know this. And the truth is I haven't been there, because there's so many other factors. Circumstantially, they've had this entire life journey to get to that point. And so it's totally different. And so to not, again, it's a practical thing to say, oh, I've been here and let's talk about it, and because we can share this. But to really kind of move more towards, I haven't been here and this is a mystery to me, maybe as much as it is for you. And let's start there. Let's have that be our starting point. I think that's more fruitful. So.
I think I would add to that, based on my faith, I would maybe encourage them to look higher. I know that God still loves them, still cares for them, and they still hope in God, whatever that might be. But there's, they're not alone. Really, they're not alone because God is with them in spite of all that they're going through. I think that might bring some comfort.
Can you all join me in thanking all our panelists?